type in your target audience, and they tell you where these people hang out, what type of podcasts they listen to, if they prefer YouTube or they hang out on Reddit, and so on and so forth.
This one's for the disruptors, the uncommon, the unconventional, the rebels. You're not here to take things lying down. Well, season 2 is about shaking things up. I'm Beatrice, and this is the Art of Branding podcast. Be ready, be badass. Let's shake some shit up.
I have 10 newsletters I sign up for. 10. That's it. That's my cap. And even then, I'm still behind. And our guest today, her newsletter is one of them. That's simply how good Adriana is. And not even to mention, she's been called out as one of the top 100 content marketing influencers in the world by SEMrush. And she's not afraid to call bullshit on the fluff speak and shoulds. Yeah, she's badass as heck. Now, Adriana, we met on LinkedIn, and I know, you know, there's always the 10K in like 10 days, marketing bros, gurus, left, right, center. What are your thoughts on them?
So many thoughts. First of all, thank you for the lovely intro. But I think I've actually built a brand around calling bullshit on these things. I've been in marketing for long enough to spot bullshit a million miles away. And I'm not afraid to call it like I see it, you know. I don't mean to kill anyone's business. I rarely give names, and if I do, they're huge creators or huge people, think Andrew Tate level. I'm not afraid to call out that guy. But other than that, I'm not naming names. I'm not discussing people. I'm discussing ideas. After so many years in marketing, I know for a fact there's a better, less sleazy way to do marketing and to sell your stuff. As long as your stuff is good enough that it can be sold without hyping it up and without promising people they can make 10K a week by working 10 minutes a day. That's not happening unless you're Warren Buffett and, you know, you already start with a few million.
Yeah, but the amount that he reads, what I heard was like he reads 8 to 12 hours each day. I don't know if that was complete bullshit though, but like I know he reads a hell of a lot. So it's like, okay, information. But then at the same time, we get so much news that like, hey, you know, take some action, like act instead of read. And then there's like other people going, you know, read, be like aware of what's going on. It's like, where is the balance?
I think the balance is different for everyone, you know, because if you're Warren Buffett's age and you have his background and his fortune, let's call it like it is, you can afford to take 6-8 hours a day just to read, you know. On the other hand, the bros that scream at you that you need to have a bias for action and it doesn't matter if you fail, just jump in on the deep end. I think that's not a very balanced take either, because as much as we like to say that failing forward is the key to success, I think that's bullshit. That's another significant piece of bullshit you see everywhere, because of course you're going to fail, but jumping in without knowing where you're going is setting yourself up for failure knowingly. And that doesn't sound smart, right? I'd rather go with Uncle Warren and read a lot so that I can make an informed decision. Not like a lot so as to start my business when I'm 80 because I need to get all the information, but you know, balance.
Damn, dropping bombs in the first 5 minutes. Like, I know that that's a big one. Like, there's always those very strong opinions. Like, you need to just go and try things. And then, yeah, like, I agree with you. There is that balance. There is like knowing and studying as you go as well, right? Like, things keep on changing. And I know you've pivoted as well. I think this quite some time to like future proofing, right? Like checking out and seeing what's going on in the future. How do you go about that?
I studied trend analysis independently. I'm not formally educated in that. And it started to light up light bulbs in my mind, you know, because I've always been future oriented, if you will, and curious about what the future holds in store. Of course, you can't know that Of course, it's all, I don't know, maybe not exactly reading tea leaves, but if you spend a bit of time analyzing what happened in the past, analyzing what's happening right now, you start to spot patterns. Like, well, one of the things I wrote about and people responded really well was my analysis on how social media platforms rise and fall, because you see this pattern everywhere. You have a social media network that's good to the users so that they attract users. Then they start being bad to the users and to attract advertisers. Then it's no longer profitable for the advertisers either because they increase the prices. There's no more organic reach. The paid reach is very, very expensive. And this is where the shit hits the fan. And you can pretty much kiss goodbye any hope of things being easy on that platform, whether you're a user, a business user, or an advertiser, you know? So things are going to get harder and harder from there. I have yet to see a social media platform that recovered from that and that can still keep every type of user happy. So yeah, I think trend analysis is pretty much, you can divide it into two phases, much like market research: collect and connect. You collect data in the beginning, and this is where you don't worry about form or format. You just dump everything into, I don't know, your format of choice, whether it's a Google Doc or Google Drive, any kind of storage thingy. And then you start to connect the dots. You start to look at patterns. You start to go for the fringe blogs, because if you only take your information from well-established news outlets, you're just going to see what everyone already sees. But fringe blogs, weird online groups, those offer insights that you rarely see elsewhere. Okay, it's a bunch of cuckoos in there, and it's really, really hard to separate the wheat from the chaff. But if you're not inclined to go down their rabbit hole, then you're solid.
Another thing, now that you mentioned that, right? I read this elsewhere, and I looked into this as well, and it's like, using other search platforms aside from Google to type in like those terms, because other platforms like Bing, etc., they'll come up with like more variety of results, like that are more inclined to go off like that basis. Like, you know, we have this one thought. And Google will just be like, yeah, here's the data to go into that one thought. Like, there's the first, 100 results.
They play on information bias, because you want to see that, especially when it comes to things like politics or societal views, you know. If you're a feminist, they're going to keep showing you feminist-related articles that paint the feminist movement in a good light. If you're anti-feminist, you're a jerk, but you're also going to get a lot of anti-feminist content from Google, because they want to keep you engaged, and seeing stuff that's contrary to what you believe in doesn't make you comfortable. It makes you shut everything down and throw the laptop in the fire. So they're just trying to keep you happy, but also misinformed.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's so many areas a business can really look at to try to tell, like, hey, for example, this is the market, or this is the area that I should focus on moving forward. Is there, I'm not going to say hacks, because I know you hate the word hacks. I mean, me too, because like there is no quick way, but are there any specific areas that they can keep an eye out, like as they're operating their business, or like have, say, for example, for me, I have Google Alerts for like specific keywords that come in once a week?
Well, it depends on what your goal is, because we're usually talking about business expansion. You want to capture a bigger pie slice, right? But you first have to decide what your goal is and how you're going to go about it. For instance, if you want to get more revenue, that's the end goal of any business, or, well, ultimately more profit. How do you want to approach this? Do you want to attract more of the people you're already attracting? Do you want to expand to another type of audience? For instance, let's say you work with solopreneurs, do you want to also work with small business owners now, or maybe tech startups? Do you want to pivot into an entirely different market, geographically speaking? Do you want to completely change what you do? Perhaps you're offering services and now you have a way to build a tech platform that delivers the same service in a DIY fashion. All of these are viable alternatives to getting more profits. So you establish this first. So say you wanna go after tech startups in your business. You're going to have to set up new Google alerts for keywords that are relevant to that space around Silicon Valley and outside of it. And you're going to want to know what's happening in their world, so you can create content and pitches and everything else you have in your marketing that speaks their language, essentially. So it's always looking backwards. You start from the client or from your target audience, and this is how you figure out where you should hang out. Other hacks, and don't tell anyone I use this word. I think my favorite hack is SparkToro. I don't know if you know the solution, the website. It's Rand Fishkin's new project it's not new anymore, but it's his project after Moz. And it's very, very easy to use. You just type in your target audience and they tell you where these people hang out, what type of podcasts they listen to, if they prefer YouTube or they hang out on Reddit, and so on and so forth. They also have a free version that you can use, and it's pretty comprehensive, even on the free tier. The paid version is also on steroids. So yeah.
I mean, even looking into that's like looking at, okay, what's happening currently, right? And I know you mentioned before, it's like also looking at the past. And I've found Google Trends or like Google keywords, seeing how they performed over like history. Like if you want to say, for example, name like a new offer, or like, want to make sure that something is really relatable in terms of wording. What are your thoughts on that?
Google Trends is a very, very good source. Also, you can reference pop culture stuff if you want to be relatable, and if your audience responds to that, if they're into know, because if you make a Taylor Swift joke but all your audience members listen to Metallica, it's not going to resonate. So again, you have to be very in tune with what your audience likes, especially when it comes to tone of voice. I don't know if I can say this, because we've been talking about this before we started recording. When I asked you,
we're on the same mindset. Like my brain is already there. You're like,
yeah. When I asked you about your policy on using explicit language, and we discussed whether your audience likes it or not, it's the same thing. You can refrain from swearing for one whole bloody hour if it's not the case, if your audience doesn't like it. But if they do, and if they feel that this is the natural language, this is a natural conversation, because we talk to each other as if we were in a pub, and of course you're going to drop a few F-bombs here and there, then it's a different story.
Exactly. And, speaking of what you just mentioned, right, like pop culture, nostalgia, like to me, I see them as, like it's looking back, but I see these things being used quite a lot, like, in terms of keeping things relatable, keeping us connected, especially with AI just being like right in front of us all the time. What are your thoughts on that and disrupting with that?
Again, it's all about market fit, because if you make a Macarena joke and your audience is too young to get it, it's going to, you're going to miss.
Just in case anyone is not seeing the video version of this, I'm actually doing the Macarena.
But other than that, pop culture and analogies are my two favorite go-tos, because if you can make an analogy out of very complex topic. You've already simplified it for your audience, but you didn't dumb it down. Because this is one of my biggest pet peeves, this mantra that you need to avoid complexity and write really, really short bits of information because our tiny brains can no longer process large amounts of information. And that's untrue. I mean, people still binge watch documentaries and Netflix shows, and they still read Tolkien, and they still read these huge books that you usually use for decor in your library. Some people still read them, and
they still exist.
Yeah.
What?
I'm one of those weirdos, and I know I'm not alone in that. I enjoy reading a good book, and the length doesn't matter as long as the book is good. If the book is bad, it can be 12 pages. I'm going to throw it away, So I think writing and in general creating information in very, very short bits is a really poor excuse when you can't create good content that keeps people engaged. Because it's one thing to use a catchy hook to get people's attention. That's the easy part, believe it or not. It's the easy part. But retaining that attention, that's where the money is. And that's where you forge relationships. If the newsletter I sent out today actually distinguished between Reels that you watch, Reels and TikToks that you watch and forget, and then Romeo and Juliet, or books and plays that have been read for hundreds of years and they're still relevant today. I can't tell you what the last 3 Reels that I watched were about, but I can tell you about to Romeo and Juliet, to Macbeth, to Oscar Wilde's Picture of Dorian Gray, and many, many people can do that. Reels, on the other hand,
That could also be repetition, though. Like, I remember how many times we were taught different version of Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet. Like,
exactly.
I agree with you, but I just want to push on that, just a little bit, because I do think that things that stick is just because it's just again and again and again and again.
Yeah. And even lighter stuff, if you will, like music, at some point they get to be part of the pop culture we mentioned before, Mm-hmm. We still reference Britney Spears, for God's sake, and she's not relevant right now, not to mention, I don't know, legends like Freddie Mercury. People still listen to Queen with Freddie Mercury.
What you mentioned there just before in regards to content, and it's something that, when I'm talking with my clients as well, it's something that comes up so frequently that, this is the style, or say, for example, this copywriter said that I should write like this style and this format. And then, I struggle to write it myself like that because I lose some form of essence. And I'm like, yeah, it's becoming, you're saying different words. You're saying different things to a degree. There's some copywriters where here's my template. So it's still before, after, and then the, right, there's a template and what it looks like. But it's almost like you're following a template regardless.
Remember when people were selling hooks on LinkedIn? They had this, buy my 500 hook template, and people were like, yes, I'm going to be so rich after I use all of these 500 hooks that no one has ever seen before. And that came and went, as it should be.
It's crazy. And now it's almost like, we're scrolling down on LinkedIn, and it always seems like similar kind of content because it's a similar kind of copywriting styles, and the ones that don't necessarily follow that. And I'm not saying writing massive paragraphs and chunks like that. In that same sense, it's easy to zone out because maybe those chunks and paragraphs are filled with jargon that, we don't necessarily want to be reading, but just having something different to those styles, to me, I believe that stands out.
Absolutely. These days, the best hook you can use is no hook at all. Just write something that no one has written before. Avoid things like, oh, hot take. It's not a hot take. And it is something so bland and tame. Or I don't know who needs to hear this. Yes, you do. You do. Call them out. Grow a pair and call them out. And if you don't know who needs to hear this, how do you know where to post it? How did you choose your channel?
It's so bad. It's so bad. But then, we end up thinking so much about our hook that we and I do this myself. Like, I overthink my hooks, like, way too much. And sometimes it's the easiest ones. Like, I'll just write it up and then, it'll be a sentence from the middle. I was like, oh, damn.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man.
That usually happens when it takes a bit of time to warm up your creative engines, and the beginning is kind of bland, but by the time you get to the middle, you're all fired up, and that's when the good stuff starts to pop.
Dropping all the good stuff. But I know we were just speaking about building an audience, and beyond that, using the pop culture and adjusting what you're talking about to the audience. So it's like, it's beyond building an audience. I know everybody talks about building an audience, and I know you also talk about it, right? Like, you build the audience, but beyond that, it's like building the right audience. And to me, like, the way that I see that is disrupting and shaking things up is a good way to, like, really niche down that audience to, these are my people, like the people that I want to be talking to.
I absolutely agree. And when you try to disrupt things, I've seen a lot of people kind of shy away from taking strong stances or for standing for what they believe in, because they're afraid they're going to alienate some people. And that's true. You are going to do that. But those weren't your people anyway. And if you want to build your audience, and if you want it to be a relevant audience instead of buying Instagram followers, which don't ever do it. It's a road to disaster. This is what you need to do. You need to show your spine. You need to first grow one and then show it. Make sure people know what you stand for. Even stuff that's not related to business,
Grow one, show one. Perfect. Love it. The values, to me, like, understanding those values. And then it's not I believe there's the base values, which everyone should have, right? Like integrity, honesty, empathy. Like, to me, I believe it's going beyond that. And then seeing what really resonates and using that as like, hey, this is how I want to, be presented. This is how I want to talk. This is who I want to attract.
Yeah. And it will be surprising but which things resonate with your audience. I think I don't talk that often about my passion for food and wine and traveling. And yet a lot of people, this is what they remember, because very few people talk about it, and they associate me with that. I have a couple of photos with a wine glass, and I talk about wine tastings, but I do it very rarely, at least on my professional platforms. I used to have an Instagram that was all about wine and travel and food. But still, this is what people remember. It creates bonds, because they have their conversation starters. Oh, you went there. Did you have any good wine? I think you asked me this at some point, because you remembered that I like wine and you like wine too. So there you go. A bond has been created.
It's that human connection. And I know I'm going to jump back to AI. That's what stands out. It's those things that we can relate, whether we like Metallica or Queen or like having a glass of wine. Those are the factors.
Yeah, because, most of us would like to say that people buy from people, not faceless brands. And that's true. But if one person doesn't have a manifest personality, if they don't show it in their communication, it's like doing business with an LTD, It's not all about outcomes. I know as marketers, as writers, we always say lead with the outcome. But when you're selling a service or even a digital product, it's also about the experience, about how you get to that outcome. I got into a tiny internet spat with an excellent copywriter who said, who used this analogy that's very spot on. It's not about when you sell holidays, for instance, it's not about how you get there, it's about the destination. This is why in travel agencies promo kits, you'd never see the crammed airplane and no leg room and sweating in airports. You just see the fancy white sand beach. And that's true. This is what you use to market it. But at some point, you're going to have to mention your process to get people there, because if it takes me 26 hours and I have to have 3 layovers to get to that sandy beach, maybe I'm going to reconsider, you know? So the process and the way you make people feel as they pursue that outcome, they also matter. And they start to matter more and more because buyers in both B2B and B2C are getting savvier. And it's not as easy to sell snake oil as it used to be. There's still plenty of snake oil in an industry, in every industry, don't get me wrong. But it's not as easy to trick people.
I saw a lot of articles going into this year about Gen Z really being forward on social stances, social and environmental stances, like what businesses are doing in that regards. And, it's not just, hey, look, we went to a community event and like that's because they forced their team to go to the community event. It's like there's no actual, it's just there for the website. It's there for like the social media, but there's no actual depth behind it.
Yeah, you go to this community event, you plant a couple of trees, but then you go back to bagging every single apple into a separate plastic bag, Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, what would you say in terms of companies, right? Like who want to show that human side, right? Like if they don't necessarily want to show like this is one person, like Elon Musk, right? if they don't necessarily want to show this one person, how would you, like, I haven't a thought on this, but how would you recommend, like, to show that human side, to show that like social integrity,
Yeah, there's a lot of talk these days about corporations, the large ones, being good citizens because they live and they thrive in a community. And I'm not just talking locally. Most of these large corporations have a global impact. And while I'm not a fan of corporations, I will admit that sometimes it's very hard for them to play fair throughout everything they do, especially if they sell consumer goods, because tracking what each of your partner does, each of the partners who are in different countries, each of your suppliers, to track their chain of responsibility, this is an incredible amount of work. And I think this is where everyone should start. The fashion industry was under scrutiny for a while because, you have these huge brands, luxury brands, but they create their clothes in sweatshops. So essentially, a bag that costs $10 to produce is going to be sold for $2,000. And it's not just that you're tricking your customers. We understand that we pay for the brand, not the fabric, but you trick the entire community and the entire society. So the first place to look at is inside before going outside and planting trees and telling people that you recycle in your company and you go paperless. You have this little thing in your email signature where you say, don't print this email unless absolutely necessary. Yeah. I started to see these things more and more rarely, which is a good thing. Maybe they finally met their goal. People stop printing emails. But the first place to look is inside. Look at your processes. Look at the carbon footprint you leave behind. And besides environmental concerns, there are also the societal ones, how your work impacts local communities, certain marginalized groups, there's a lot that you maybe don't even see from the inside. So if you have the budget for it, it's always a good idea to hire someone to evaluate this impact for you and to tell you where you should start to take action.
Even on the social front, like I believe it was Dior or another one of those brands. I love how they show like behind the scenes, their team talking about like going through the ideation of like a certain bag and how like, they're showing the hand stitching, etc. That they're bringing people into what's usually like, you don't know what's going on. And I think that even in B2B sense, right, there's so much potential of really bringing people in and showing like, hey, this is what's going on. And, showing the team, showing there is emotion, even though it's a company.
Exactly. And I'm very happy to see that even for big-ish companies, the About Us page is no longer where a young, dedicated team who, they have pictures of actual humans having fun, not looking constipated in a carpet picture,
Yeah. So in terms of brands that have done this right, like brands that shake things up, that disrupt really well, are there any that inspire you, that really give you fire?
Well, I'm going to start with the obvious, although I will add a caveat to it because I'm not sure everything they say is true, is Patagonia, the brand, who claim to be very committed to sustainability and building products that last. But on a smaller scale, Spartoro does an excellent job of educating their consumers. I recommended their tool not because I'm an affiliate. I don't have any affiliation with them, but it's an extraordinarily good tool, and they do a great job of promoting it without being sleazy. They're very transparent. They have these webinars where they actually teach you something about marketing and market research. It's not a glorified infomercial that, they spend 50 minutes pitching their product and 10 minutes telling you something that's pretty much marketing 101 everyone knew. And Basecamp is also very good at what they do, and one of the few brands that actually build stuff in public.
So like you see what their steps are, or like their day-to-day of building out an offer or something like that?
Yes, and they were one of the first SaaS companies to disrupt SaaS pricing and say, hey, listen, this pay-per-month model is broken. We just built a solution. You pay for it once, and it's yours forever. And unsurprisingly, the solution is called Once.
I've seen that, they started and it's now like starting to pick up, like some businesses are coming in. Yeah, no, we only charge once, be it for like email, subscription, like solutions, etc. It's picking up. I'm curious how the businesses who are operating on a monthly basis, how they're going to respond to that, because that's a big one to shake up. Like people are just going to move if what they get with the other business is the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know a lot of people love the model initially because it requires a smaller investment, and especially in the marketing space, in SaaS solutions for marketers, you want a free trial or a cheap trial to get a sense of the solution, to figure out if it's right for you. You don't want to just dive in. But on the other hand, those monthly bills, they kind of add up, and if you tally it all up, you realize you end up paying thousands and thousands per month. I had a newsletter issue where I talked about the subscription economy, because it's the business solutions, but it's also the Netflixes and the Disneys and Hulu and everything else, and Spotify, and everything adds up. This is why, for instance, I'm building my course right now. I'm about to start recording, and I went for a solution that allows me to pay everything in full. I pay once and I have access for forever.
Now that's a game changer. So there's one question that I ask everyone that comes on board the podcast, and that is, what is one societal norm that you want to push back on and teach others about?
The way we expect women to act in business. It's coming from an obsolete patriarchal view that women should be these delicate flowers who aren't necessarily interested in making huge amounts of money. They're just there to support their children because first and foremost, they're homemakers. And I believe that this is pure and utter crap. Women do want to make a lot of money, even if they don't have children. And it's not always about the family and supporting the home they've created. Sometimes they want the nice jewelry for themselves. They want the nice trips. Buying a private island. And I don't think these are goals to be ashamed of. It's not something to be ashamed of just because you're acting like a man or the way only men acted until recently. We see, we look at these fights between Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos, and they're essentially butthurt because one of them is no longer the richest man on earth for a brief period until their stock bounces back up, until the stock prices of their company bounce back up. And we're slightly amused by it, but we also understand because they're bullish men, they're cutthroat, we don't expect the same from a woman, and I think that's completely mistaken.
Like going beyond the stereotypes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Now, if you're not already signed up for Adriana's newsletter, check out the link to that and much more in the podcast show notes. I'm not sure, maybe the course that you're working on now might be up by the time this episode drops. Regardless, the link will be there to your website, which I'm assuming you're going to promote it on there.
Absolutely.
Hell yeah.
It won't be hard to find.
Definitely. Either that or in social, like on LinkedIn. And if you'd like to help this reach more ears, drop a 5-star review is a great way. And when you're ready to shift your business from just another to the obvious, visit Badassery by B to get started. Thanks for listening, you badasses.
Time for bloopers. Yay!
I mean, I've been stalking you forever. That's kind of creepy.
So have I, because of the kangaroo and the actual badassery, because a lot of people talk about being disruptive and walking the talk, but very few people do, You start with all the badass stuff in the beginning, but then you kind of dilute it because it's hard to maintain, a certain level of disruptiveness. Is that a word? I don't know. But
yeah, like, because there's just so much shift in terms of, like, profiles don't stay consistent. You look at a profile 6 months from now and they're doing something totally different. At least that's what I feel like on LinkedIn. I'm like, I thought you were supposed to be a coach expert or social selling expert. And then 3 months later, we're actually newsletter experts. You're like, but what? And then the thing is, it's fine to pivot. We pivot, right? But then the claims. Oh my God. Okay. Anyway, we're going to jump into that in a minute.
Yeah, we're going to do a little bit of gossip. But before you actually start, how are we on the language policy?
Oh yeah, no, whatever. Swear.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, no. Sorry. I feel like I should mention that in advance. It is explicit rated. Explicitly explicit. Okay. It's the next level. I mean, it's part of the brand, right? Bloopers and swearing. Not a crazy, I don't swear a crazy amount, but there is swearing. That's just part of, I'm going to do that one more time.